and then we would go 2 by 2, door to door, inviting self-identified Catholic freshmen to the Newman Center. Sometimes we were received warmly, and sometimes we were laughed at. But by that first month of my freshman year, I was learning what it meant to be in love with Jesus and living as his disciple, seeking his will and proclaiming the gospel to those around me. Or to use a more succinct term that Heather and I are so passionate about, I was learning what it meant to be an intentional disciple.
When I began my freshman year at the University of Nebraska, I was an evangelical Protestant. I had recently dropped out of sorority recruitment, and I was struggling to find my place on campus. I was beginning to search for a church home, and I had no idea where that would lead me, but I was confident that it would never be within the doors of the Catholic Church.
By the end of my freshman year and much discernment, I had decided to enter the School Sisters of Christ the King. The support of my peers at the Newman Center was invaluable. It was a safe place to share my future plans where I knew I'd be encouraged.
By the end of my freshman year, I knew I needed to get more involved on campus, and I made the decision to try out for the University of Nebraska Spirit Squad. I was thrilled to become a member of the cheer squad and felt like my life was finally beginning to have some direction.
After a year with the School Sisters, the sisters helped me discern that God was not calling me to be a sister. The Newman Center was a safe place for me to land and transition back to campus life. I quickly got involved as a board member and a choir director at Newman.
Fast forward to my senior year, my exterior life was a portrait of perfection. But on the inside, I was struggling and searching to find meaning. I met a cute guy who I really liked, and after nearly 2 years of dating, the only serious problem in our relationship was his pesky Catholic faith. I did what any good Protestant girl would do, and I started RCIA here at the Newman Center to prove to my boyfriend how silly Catholicism was.
Fast forward to my senior year, I met my now husband, Luke, at a Newman Center function when our 2 Bible studies got together. Over the course of 2 years, we dated, got engaged, and we were married at the Newman Center by Father Robert Mattia.
As I journeyed through RCIA, I quickly found that all of my arguments were defeated and accidentally fell in love with the Catholic Church. I was baptized, confirmed, and received my first Holy Communion on Easter of 2009, and I went on to marry that cute Catholic boy in the summer of 2010.
What the Newman Center did in Heather and Maya's life was radically different, but it was exactly what we needed at the time. The Newman Center taught me how to be an intentional disciple, instructed me on how to be a leader, helped me to discern my vocation, and led me to my husband. So, I cannot discuss what the Newman Center has done for me without it bringing up deep emotions. When I sat with my husband at the dedication mass at the Newman Center, I began to weep as I realized that the Newman Center gave me my life as I now know it. Without this place, I wouldn't have the sacraments, which get me through all of life's ups and downs, a wonderful sacramental marriage to my husband, an openness to life that has resulted in the births of our beautiful children, and the blessing of numerous friendships that have encouraged and challenged me to become the best version of myself every day. In time, God planted both of our families in Holdridge, Nebraska, a small community south of Kearney. For whatever reason, Providence obviously, Holdridge has become a flourishing Catholic community. A generation ago, it was predominantly evangelical and Lutheran, and actually many say that it was anti-Catholic. But that has been changing. A year ago, there were 6 young families who were married at the Newman Center, all living in Holdridge, Nebraska. There are many children at every Mass, as evidenced by the amount of chaos at every liturgy. My children contribute to that greatly. Our Catholic school is growing. It seems there are baptisms almost every month. We have 24 hours of adoration in our parish of 240 families, and there are at least 2 people at every hour.
We have a thriving men's and women's Bible study, both with 20 to 30 people, where even some Protestants attend. The men have been meeting for 4 years at 5:30 a.m. every Friday. It's very inspiring. Father Holdren has nicknamed our community Little Rome. It's exciting and humbling to be a part of the Catholic community in Holdridge right now. The Holy Spirit is definitely moving. All Saints is vibrant, growing and young, and other faith communities have begun to take notice.
But the story we want to tell you today isn't really about us. It's about how the Newman Center is having ripple effects, changing hearts of individuals, families, and ultimately the world. What began happening in Holdridge was that many young families began living their Catholic faith alongside one another in a way that demonstrated the truth and beauty of the faith, specifically through the joyful way it was lived out. You see, when you have a faith community of young families living out their Catholic faith intentionally with joy, it causes others to pause and take note of where that deep-rooted joy is coming from and begin to seek that out for themselves. The story we want to share with you today is about the conversion of our dear friends, Jeremy and Shell Ham, and the larger impact that had. And they're in the back with us tonight, and hopefully y'all get to meet them. Jeremy and Shell were content evangelical Protestants who for some reason spent a lot of their free time with Catholics. They began taking note of Catholic family life and began asking questions of their trusted Catholic friends. One evening, the Hams were watching a Nebraska football game with our friends Mike and Mindy Pelster, who are also joining us tonight. Shell inquired of Mike why Catholics pray only to saints. And Mike, who had recently fallen back in love with the church and was pursuing how God was calling him to be an intentional disciple, engaged her in a conversation about the truth and beauty of the Catholic faith. The next day, he left a catechism on their doorstep. Who does that, right? The huge catechism, he left it on their doorstep for them to you know, it's light reading, to just learn a few things. Both Jeremy and Shell felt individually called to explore Catholicism, and they were floored to discover that their partner was equally moved to learn more. They were quickly provided with more resources than they could handle, and came to enter the church at the Easter Vigil of 2015. Their 4 children were later baptized on August 15th, the Feast of the Assumption. My husband Chris and I, and Becky and her husband Luke, were honored to be chosen as godparents of 2 of their 4 children. The Hams are now influential members of All Saints Parish. They've served as CCD instructors, Shell is the adoration coordinator, and both are active in men's and women's Bible studies offered at the church. Their 10-year-old son Brady, who we are the proud godparents of, has fallen in love with the Mass since becoming an altar server, and this summer he would ride his bike to the parish at 7:30 a.m. to assist Father Lux with Mass, and he even requested of his parents to transfer to All Saints Catholic School this fall.
Heather and I were so grateful that simply trying to be faithful, holy Catholic families was enough to change our community one family at a time. So at the same time that all this was going on with the Hams, Heather and I were growing in friendship with each other and walking alongside each other in our spiritual lives. On Tuesday mornings, we would often meet at the YMCA and walk around the track and share what we were reading and how God was speaking in our hearts and how we thought He was calling us to serve. And then we'd often talk about our favorite podcasts. So a podcast is basically a pre-recorded radio program, and it can be on pretty much any topic you can imagine. They can be accessed on your phone or your laptop or your iPad and started and stopped at any time. So one that we particularly loved is called The Happy Hour with Jamie Ivey. On it, women share all kinds of things about their lives, their relationships with Jesus, how they serve the body of Christ. It's a beautiful podcast, but it isn't Catholic, and occasionally they'll discuss things that are counter to church teaching. So Heather and I would lament, for example, about how some of the guests could speak so flippantly about making permanent decisions to limit their family size. This podcast was so great, we thought, if only it could embody the whole truth, all of the teaching of Christ. So one day we were walking around the track and talking about the most recent episode of The Happy Hour, and Heather casually said, "You and I should just have our own Catholic podcast." And we both laughed about what a ridiculous idea that was. But I went home after that conversation and I could not stop thinking about Heather's crazy idea. At one point, I remember so vividly asking myself, what would I do if I knew I couldn't fail? And I immediately knew I'd start a podcast. I quickly texted Heather, I can't stop thinking about your crazy idea. Me too, she responded.
We went to coffee a few days later. There were so many things for us to consider. Who would be our target audience? We knew we didn't want it to be a mommy podcast. We wanted to reach all Christians. What would be the format? We wanted to interview people who were living the gospel. What does it even take to create a podcast? Now, we knew nothing about this, and frankly, are still both very technologically illiterate. The fact that the two of us release episodes each week is proof of God's goodness and glory. What would we call it? We knew instantly that the title that would encompass our mission would be to call it Go Forth. What would that mission be? We wanted to inspire intentional discipleship in Christians everywhere.
So we spent the next few months trying to figure out how in the world to launch a podcast. This involved buying equipment, having a logo made, setting up a Facebook page, booking our first guests. It was such a long process, and there were so many obstacles in those first few months that when I finally hit record on my laptop and I heard my voice play back to me, I cried tears of joy. So many other coincidences occurred in those last few weeks before our launch that we knew God's hand was behind this. This podcast was and is truly God's work. Heather and I have no prior skill sets that make us qualified to have a podcast, just a love for Jesus and a desire to say yes. The seeds that have been planted at the Newman Center and throughout our lives have led us to this point. God wanted something from us. We didn't necessarily feel worthy or capable of launching a podcast, but we felt a strong pull in our hearts to do something great for God, and over time, He equipped us. On December 8th of last year, we launched our first 3 episodes of Go Forth with Heather and Becky. To date, we've released 46 episodes. Many of the people that we've interviewed are here tonight. Bishop James Conley, Father Robert Mattia. Actually, we would really appreciate it if you have been a guest on our podcast before. We would love for you to stand up for just a moment. Represent the almost 50 individuals that we've interviewed. They are living extraordinary lives and striving to be intentional disciples. Our podcast is so much more about the people that you saw standing here than it is about us. If you've never listened before, you might check out one of the episodes of the people that you saw standing to get started. And if you aren't sure how to listen, you can ask maybe someone at your table. Pull out your phones after the evening tonight. You can also grab Heather or I, and we'd be happy to show you how to pull it up. Also, we can tell you what our favorite episodes are. And there are business cards on the back inside of your programs tonight, and it can direct you to our brand new website that just launched this morning. You can listen to all of our episodes right from our website and find out how to partner with us in our mission. We would be so honored if you would check out our website.
Shortly after launching our podcast, we knew that we wanted to share the story of the Hams. Their episode was episode 9 of our podcast, and it released on January 9th of 2016. It featured both Jeremy and Shell being vulnerable and sharing the story of their journey into the Catholic Church, and it was a truly beautiful episode.
People all over the country and beyond have listened to Jeremy and Shell's episode. Shell said she was getting texts all day from people in our community, many who attended the church that they previously went to. 2 specific people who listened lived on the opposite side of the stage from Jeremy and Shell, Shell's parents, Randy and Denise, who are also here this evening. At the time, Randy had been away from the Catholic Church for almost 40 years, and Denise was not attending church, although the family had previously been very active in the Presbyterian Church. The 2 listened, had a long conversation, and within a few days, Shell got a phone call from her mom, Denise, with some very surprising news.
This year at Easter, Shell's mother, Denise, joined the Catholic Church, and her father, Randy, went to confession and came back into full communion with the church. Perhaps without the Newman Center, Jeremy and Shell would never have been surrounded by so many faithful Catholic families, and perhaps Shell's parents would have never come back into the fullness of the Catholic Church. We want to end with this note we received from Shell's mom, Denise, with her permission. She initially wrote this to us before she entered the church and added a bit to it for the purposes of our talk tonight. Hi, Heather and Becky. This is Denise, Shell's mom. I think she has probably shared with you that I am being confirmed next Saturday night. I have watched Shell and Jeremy over this past year and was inspired by their faith. Then in January, I was really struggling. My priorities were out of order. Work was consuming so much of my time. I was in tremendous physical and emotional pain. I knew I had to make changes starting with my faith. I wondered if it might be in the Catholic faith. I missed the Facebook post about Shell and Jeremy's episode, and my friend mentioned it to me during a phone conversation. I listened to it as soon as I hung up. You had a part in my decision, and I thank you so much. I called and spoke with the priest. Randy and I met with him, and he fast-tracked me by meeting with us weekly. I feel so at home. Here I am, 40 years later, joining the church. Now I am so much more at peace. I am so much happier. I catch myself humming as I walk to the store because I just feel lighter. Anyway, wanted to thank you for interviewing my hams and for your part in leading my heart to the church. Denise.
Today, Denise works for the Archdiocese of Omaha and counsels people who are grieving, passing her faith forward. Another link in the chain of faith shared over time. This is the story of how the Newman Center impacted us and consequently so many others. We know a story like this could be repeated all over the country. Thousands of young people have been formed at the Newman Center and are impacting their communities. Their stories are unique and creative, but similar in that they have the same goal of reaching souls for Christ. Your support of the Newman Center with your time, talent, and treasure is making a difference. It is changing the world.
We hope we have shown you tonight the importance of supporting the work of the Newman Center and have inspired you to continue saying yes to whatever it might be that God is calling you to in your daily life. It can be as simple as placing a catechism on your friend's doorstep, inviting someone to RCIA, or letting the beauty of our faith show through in the joyful way you live your daily life. As Mother Teresa said, never worry about numbers. Help one at a time, and always start with those nearest you.
Heather and I are no more qualified to be standing up here than any one of you. God called and equipped us to start a podcast. God has a specific and unique task with your name on it. No one else can do what you've been called to do. You are invaluable to the work of the church. Heather and I are continuously humbled by what the Lord can do with our tiny and seemingly insignificant yes. And we feel confident that if God can use these two mothers from the middle of America, He can use you too.
And as we always conclude our podcast episodes, St. Maximilian Kolbe,
Pray for us. Now go forth. We'll see you next time.